I'll try to present the concepts of Nix to you today, but those will be really basic ones. So if you've already worked with Nix, you probably won't find it interesting. However, why this talk? Basically, it's for people who just heard the word Nix, for people who mistake the Nix with Unix, for people who maybe heard about it, know what it is, but haven't started it yet. So I try to present you what Nix exactly is. So yeah. What is Nix exactly? Nix means nothing. So yeah, thanks for joining my talk. Nix means nothing. But seriously, it's also permethrin. That's the drug for insect bites. But I'll be talking about this Nix. So basically, Nix consists of three basic parts, which is Nix as a package manager, Nix as the language, and Nix as the OS. So basically, this diagram shows it all. So it should be quite understandable for everyone in here. So yeah, let's have a bit of story time. Just a question to the audience. Have any of you ever used Nix? Okay. Was it just a package manager or an entire OS? OS, yeah. Okay, that's fine. Because, well, actually, quite a lot of time has passed since I've applied to this talk, because I've applied to this talk on 16th of November last year, and since then 255 days passed. And since the original date of the talk, which would be 11th of February this year, 168 days passed. So that's quite a long time, right? And quite a lot of things changed in our world. In IT, things change constantly. Even new Ubuntu came out. So yeah, I think that everyone has certain problems in IT, and Nix can solve them. Like, maybe you've tried to package your software for a Linux distribution or even a Mac, right? It can be quite complex, especially if you want to, pack it for APT, RPM, DEP, and things like that, right? There's also AUR, and that's just massive, right? The other thing is, who of you use Linux on an everyday basis? Quite a lot, right? So yeah, and we all know that if you use something different than the default ones, like Ubuntu or Arch, it can take a while, especially if you use more exotic distros, like Bedrock. So yeah, Nix also solves that. And, well, I guess we all share some of the same problems. I guess we all can agree on that. So what is special about Nix? There are three main things on which we have to focus. So that's reproducibility, immutability, and rollbacks. And those are just, let's say, core features of Nix, which are the most important ones. Basically, around this, the whole philosophy of Nix is built around. So basically, relating to the diagram I showed you at the very beginning, starting with Nix as a language, this is what a Nix expression looks like, because we call those Nix expressions. Nix as a language is almost pure and lazy functional programming language. Basically, as we can see, it's quite easily built, right? I mean, it can look quite different, but this is what a package in Nix packages looks like. And to give you a perspective how easy that is, basically, the most important ones are starting at line 6 and then at line 17. Basically, those are the, let's say, most important ones in Nix. And that's where the magic of Nix comes in. Basically, you can use Nix to pack things and also declare things to make them reproducible, as in here, because you can see that we use fetch from GitHub, we specify which commit we want to use, and we also specify a checksum of a thing. So we can also use fetch tarball, the same thing. We can also specify a checksum in here. So basically, the thing is, it won't calculate the Nix expression if the checksum is invalid, right? Or if the commit doesn't exist. So that's, whenever you run this code, you'll always have the same output, always. Like literally, no matter if you're working from a Mac, from Linux, or Windows WSL, it's gonna always be the same, because without those, Nix expression won't evaluate. I want to mention a thing called flakes. In Nix ecosystem, we just agreed that everyone knows what a flake is. They've been around for a while. A lot of people use those on an everyday basis. I do, for example. Just quickly saying what they are, they're more or less an advanced feature of Nix. They're quite different from a regular Nix. They're very powerful. So like in Flex, you have a concepts of inputs and outputs, and other Flex can be used as inputs, for example. So I'll show you an example later in real world case. But thanks to them, and thanks for the possibility of using other Flex as inputs, basically the possibilities skyrocket. Here, then there's Nix as a package manager. So there are a few most important things when it comes to this thing. Basically, thanks to the Nix as a package manager, you can use cross-compilation. I'll show you in a moment what you can do with it. You can also do static compilation, so all the libraries will be in a binary. It's also easy to set up a binary cache. So if you're in enterprise environment and you can't trust the third-party repositories, you can just set up your own caches, basically, for where you will keep your binary packages pre-built for everyone in your company, or Nix expressions that users can evaluate on their hardware themselves. Also, Nix is source-based, so you actually don't have to fork it. You can just apply patches and things like that on the fly, basically. And also, one of the most important features is that that's a single package manager for different development environments. So, yeah, I'll show it in a moment. Basically, the thing with different development environments is that no matter in which language you work in, so whether it's Python, Haskell, Scala, basically you can use a feature like dev-shells, for example, and basically you will have a reproducible and immutable development environment, which can also be temporary, so that's crazy. And no matter what you use, you can build your entire environment around it. So yeah, it's quite advanced. And it comes to cross-compilation. That's a Nix rep, because we have that in Nix. This is just a curated list of supported architectures and systems. So as you can see, it's quite a lot. Like remake cable to like risk feeds. So yeah, everyone will find everything for themselves. And even though some may not be listening here, like 32-bit Linux, Nix will still work with that just fine, even though it's curated, let's say. So that's the real-world example that we can cross-compile. So in here, I wanted to build a package for RISC-V for 64 bits. I used the FLAC rebuild because I built that before. And just as a proof, here's a uname that I'm building from WSL2, and that's x86-64 system. And the result is a RISC-V binary file. So yeah, that's very handy. And that's the dev shell I wanted to mention. That's the example dev shell. That's for poetry, for Python developers. That's all it takes to have your reproducible environment just for Python. You can enter it, and it won't affect your current system. So basically, you jump into that, and if you leave that environment, it won't affect your entire OS, so it's temporary. Even if you have your terminal and open a second tab, things which you use in a dev shell won't be accessible from the another tab in your terminal, even though it's the same window. And well, actually, dev shells are really cool. That's a flake, in fact, because there are inputs and outputs. You can see that I just define packages poetry to Nix, and thanks to them, I can also define different environment variables. So yeah, if you're working with several of those, for example, for testing purposes, it's very handy. So yeah. Then just a quick look to Nix as an OS. That's actually the biggest topic in Nix, because you can combine all of those aspects into one big thing. Well, that's the biggest one in Nix. So yeah, to put that in perspective, that's basically how it looks like. It's sometimes better than others, right? To put that even in better perspective, that's how it looks like on an everyday basis. So basically, if you're using regular Linux, that's, for example, Arch, it's imperative. We don't like imperative, let's be honest. You don't have rollbacks by default. I mean, you can use BTR file system, but who of you uses BTR file system? Or really nice, but NixOS does that no matter the file system. You can use exFAT4 or Z file system, it's fine. Nix just does that. And actually, in my personal opinion, NixOS has one truly good version of systemd inside. I'm not the biggest fan of systemd. I really like RT Linux. That's a quite nice project where you can pick your own init from a few different ones. However, NixOS has the only good implementation of systemd, in my opinion, because thanks to that, you can just use your configuration file and define all of your services there. Like, it's very easy and handy. So, for example, if you want to set up a caps, that's literally services.caps.enable equals true and semicolon. That's all you have to do to enable caps, and that's also reproducible. You just write one config file, and you can use it forever. So, like, at the beginning, I thought that my talk was accepted 255 days ago. The config I wrote that 255 days ago can still be used today. I can change some minor things, like something is deprecated, like some options in Nix, or maybe some packages were removed because there were no maintainer or they were insecure or whatever. Like NixOS 22.05, so the current stable dropped the support for Python 2 packages. Developers had 10 years to move to Python 3. Like, yeah, it was quite a while. So NixOS dropped that support. You know, the config I wrote that long ago, or even 2 years ago, so I started with Nix around 2 years ago, can still be used today with minor changes, and some of them without any changes at all. So yeah. However, NixOS has some downsides. I'm sorry to admit that. However, if you get a binary from internet, you probably have to patch all of it. So, libraries in NixOS are in different place than they are in regular, normal, let's say, Linux distributions. So you have to say to Nix where the libraries actually are. And they can be in different parts of Nix store because, well, also, here's a meme about the learning curve of NixOS, and basically it looks like that because, as I said, it's the biggest one in the entire Nix family. And, well, it can take a while to learn that. I mean, if you're stubborn, it can take one evening. But, like, for most of us, it can take 1 week or longer because you have to use Nix language to define your system. I mean, if you use Wiki, it's okay. It's totally easy. But if you want to do more advanced stuff, that can take a while. But I think that you just have to get used to that. So, yeah. Here's an example. Actually, Nix allows you to do different things. There's also things like nix-shells, and in here we have an example of a thing called nix-env. It's cool, especially if you're not on NixOS itself, and if you use Nix standalone as a package manager, it's totally okay. However, there are some downsides to it. First of all, it's imperative, and it can mask your current system state. So as you can see in an example in my terminal, so if which man is in /user/bin, but if I use nix-env to install, for example, BusyBox, and then which man, it will use Nix directory somewhere. So yeah, it can mess up your system sometimes. I mean, some users really want that, right? But in general, that's a no-no. However, here come nix-shells, basically, because they're Here's an example of a nix-shell. To be exact, that's the one I wrote. That's more advanced than the one I've showed before, because I just import packages from somewhere. The biggest advantage of Nix shells is that they're temporary, as I've mentioned. So they won't mess up your system. That's a really way to go. And also important thing is that you can have several terminal windows, and in all of them you can use a different version of Python, for example. So in one you'll use 2.7, in another 3.9, in another 3.10, and they can also work side by side. That's really cool, especially if you have to test several different environments. However, there are things like, for people like me who use, or at least try to use, more exotic software. Here's my favorite build I've built. That's the Bedrock Linux. Have any of you heard even about Bedrock Linux, or not at all? Yeah, one guy. That's nice. So the concept of Bedrock is that it's like the total opposite of Nix. However, even in such an exotic environment, you can see that's in the lower part in here, that actually Nix works then. However, you have to know that Nix outside of systemd actually doesn't like those environments. Basically, here's a screenshot of my PR to Nix itself about adding service files for different inits. And it's open since late, and like 2 guys checked it, and well, that's all that happened there. One guy suggested rewriting the entire NixOS. However, right now you can use the services I've written there, or you're on your own if you want to use full-blown Nix on no systemd distro. Basically, the problem is that Nix doesn't have the service files for Nix daemon. You can use it as a single user, fine, that's great, but you can use it as a user, where you have one of the core features of Nix, which is built isolation, so it won't mess things. But well, those service files I put in here are actually working. So if you're using OpenRC or run it or dynit, you can just grab them. Or if you're using UX, but I don't think that anyone uses that. However, there are things beyond Nix as a regular. There's Nix community projects organization on GitHub. That's a really cool one. And the most important examples of the creations there by Nix community, that would be nix-portable. I really wanted to show nix-portable, but the last release was 9 months ago, and that was Nix 2.4 pre-something. And like a few days ago, Nix has nix-portability built in, because on 11th of July, that's like 2 weeks ago, Nix 2.10 came out. And basically, that's a screenshot from the... If you don't have /nix permissions, and you can't create that directory, you can use a directory, your home directory, as a CRUD store. So basically, that's more or less permissionless and very portable friendly. Like you can just put it on your USB thumb drive and just use it around whenever you're traveling, and you will have your beloved package manager always with you. That's a cool feature. And the other, here's an example how it works. Basically, that's shell. So then, and you can see that it works just fine. So yeah. And the other important thing in beyond Nix is Home Manager. It's, as it sounds, it basically manages your home directory. It's very handy if you're not using NixOS as well. Basically, it keeps all your configs at one place. So you just make a home Nix, for example, and tell which files put to where. And you can also turn it into flakes so other people can just grab it, and they'll have the same config as you do without any major difficulties. So basically, that's how it looks like. What's the too long to read? Those are those 2 pages. The wall of text is on purpose because it's cast only minor parts of Nix, the most important ones. And I see that I'm almost out of time. So basically, Nix allows you to do more crazy stuff. This one's for NixOS, and this one's for Nix and Nix packages. Basically, I've mentioned rollbacks, for example, but well, your system is also immutable, right? Do things like NixOps, so to manage your servers just like that remotely. It's really cool. Also, you can mix and match bleeding and stable features easily. Just define those in your config. It's easy to set up your virtual machines, for example. You can just have the same config for a lifetime. If you want to do GPU path, define it and always use it. And kernel hacking is quite easy. So yeah. When it comes to Nix and Nix packages, so focus on correctness. So as I mentioned on the very beginning, you can't evaluate a Nix expression if the checksum is not correct one. It's very convenient for CI/CD environments. It's great for testing. While that cross compilation is really crazy, that's very handy. You can use one package manager to basically everything. I've mentioned Python and Haskell, but you can do much more. For example, manage your Docker files, because or who of you uses Docker? Quite a lot, right? However, your Docker builds are not reproducible. They're only repeatable. That's the case that people don't always get, because if you do just Docker build, the output can change, and the checksum of Docker can be different, or at least in my testing was different, because the checksums are not the same. Docker and the direct file signature, right? So yeah, what is Nix? First of all, Nix is the future. And Nix is very handy thing for everyone in here. You can do everything with it. You can package your stuff around it. You can use it as a wrapper for everything. You can use it as an OS, which will always be the same. If you're an IT support somewhere, you can just write one config for an entire company, and then using NixOps, you just run the same config on 10,000 machines at the same time, and each one of those machines will be exact same. That's how powerful Nix is. So yeah, here are the references. I'll publish the slides just after the talk, if you want to grab those. And before I finish, I want to thank several people, basically Simon Thompson and John Hughes for also Scala Implant community for not banning me for shitposting Nix memes, and countless people online that actually help you survive your Nix adventure. So yeah, however, I've got something special for you. Self-shilling example. Talking is quite easy, right? So let's actually show a real-world usage. I've made 2 projects. I know I'm very creative when it comes to naming, so those are called RedNix and RedNixOS. I'm very creative, I know. Those are for cybersecurity people. So basically, Nix is so powerful that you can build an entire distro around it. That's a screenshot, just running random things to, showcase something, right? But actually, you can build your own quote-unquote distro using Nix. You just output to the ISO file, which will always be the same. That's how crazy it gets. That's the RedNixOS, and RedNix is also a fine one, because that uses, I think, dev-shells, for sure. That's a good one. And the other thing is that RedNix is also a NixOS container. Basically, those are systemd containers, but wrapped around Nix. And those are, let's say, more or less more advanced versions of dev-shells. I'll show you in a moment, because actually I can... is my screen still working? Yeah, that's great. Okay, so I have Nix Playground. I hope nothing goes wrong. WSL, sorry. Okay, so actually I have several things in here. Let's start with RedNix. Yes, sure. Okay, but you'll see in a moment RedNix, and I can nix flag show. A bit more, okay. That can take a while. However, you already see that there's a flake. Both of these projects use flakes. You can see that there's a container to drop something online. So yeah, sorry about the connectivity in here. But that's the example of how powerful a flake can be, because that's the container and quite a lot of dev shells in here. Sorry, it should start in a moment. Yes. Still evaluating. Still, and finish. So basically, that's how powerful a flake can be. Basically, those are just packages, but I've also made a separate dev environments for people in cybersecurity. So you can just use Nix and grab one of those. Here's, for example, for Darwin. Here's for Arch64 Linux. Basically, you can just grab certain of those. For example, Bluetooth packages made for security people, or my packages, which I've made. Yeah, and also Flake as an input. Here's Apple Princess packages. One person on GitHub just posted Nix expressions for things that couldn't be accepted to Nix packages for several reasons, like Empire for PowerShell. And well, yeah, but I can Nix develop dot hash. For example, I hope nothing changed. Building, okay, so I've just jumped into dev shell. Sorry, I don't have a theme there, but you can also make a different theme for your shell. So you actually have appended that here in the shell. Actually, you can see that if I want to run something from there, I have Ubertooth packages. That's for Bluetooth hacking. But if I exit, I don't have those anymore. So yeah, I was clicking tabbing here, but an example how separate that is. So yeah, and see the Non-NixOS and also Nix like show the smaller one. Yes, that's the entire NixOS configuration as a flake. You can grab it from GitHub, and you can build different ISO files from there. You can have several different configs in one place. So you can have separate configs for different users, like in corporate environments. But you can also mix and match features. So like there's a KDE one, and there's also XFCE, and there's light version of it. And well, I haven't finished it yet. There's only alpha available right now. It's kind of buggy right now, but you can see it's working, and there's even Non-NixOS appended to kernel names. So yeah, that's how crazy Nix gets. Basically, you can do even more with that. That's only a tip of an iceberg, what you can do with Nix. So yeah, that should be it. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Konrad, for the talk. It was really nice. Let's maybe start with some online questions, and then we'll move to the questions in the room.
And while we are doing that, I will be collecting them.
Okay, question in the room first.
Hey, thanks for the talk. I wanted to ask how, like, as I come from the Haskell background, I really miss some tooling around writing the Nix expressions. I don't know, like show documentation, obviously types, but that's not the case there. But how do I just like explore the ecosystem, like when I develop the expressions?
You can see how others packed it. That's one of the best examples. But I think one of the most recommended packages, I'm not into Haskell that much, but I see people online recommend, for example, Cabal to Nix. So it's basically painless for you. It will wrap your Cabal stuff. I don't know how it works. I have no functional programming background at all. And that should just wrap around things. You can also explore things online. There's quite a big community of Nix users. Just ask. I'm sorry, but I'm not really knowledgeable in terms of Haskell. But that should be it. Just exploring what already we have or asking people out. They're really helpful.
Yeah, not asking about like Haskell packages explicitly, but I don't know. I really miss some like auto completion. I don't know discovery about available expressions that can build something, or should I just read the docs?
Reading the docs is a must-have for sure. You want to explore what has been built, right? Okay, so just go to the Git repo and check the expressions for Haskell things. There's a code there, like I've shown an example of my package. You can just read it and see how different it builds, whether it's fetching from GitHub or fetching a tarball, or maybe there's an instruction for building custom things. You can also use usually can use the same expression for different things. For example, my Golang packages basically are one-to-one without, of course, those checksums and revisions. So basically, yeah. But reading the docs is a must-have, to be honest.
Any more questions? Okay, the question here.
So my question is, how is the story with updating packages? Because you mentioned that everything is immutable, so do you have to manually update those configuration files, or is it like some rolling release thing, and it like goes over your configuration files automatically? How does it work?
Okay, so actually there are two ways of doing that. Let's discuss, for example, a standard NixOS. That's not a flake. You can tell in a config which version of package you want to use exactly, or it will just grab one of the latest ones from Nix packages, basically that. And if you have flakes, there will, besides from a flake.nix, a flake.log file will be created with all those revisions or checksums there. Basically, you just see what's there, and if you want to update that, you can just nix flake update to grab the latest things from your inputs. Yeah, that's basically one command to manage your flake. Yeah.
Thanks for the talk. So I have a question regarding, in your experience, do you see some of the software distribution that they don't behave well when it comes to producing immutable outputs, and they need special care? Like, I don't know. What I meant is things like an npm package or cpan or this kind of thing. Is there any particular one that are painful in your experience?
Okay, so if I understood correctly, you have a case where your output from your, for example, cthink is mutable, right? But how is it mutable? Because I've mentioned Docker, because I'm not the biggest fan of Docker, because like there's tag latest, one is latest, for example, right? It depends on what you're building, but as I mentioned, you can lock to certain dependencies. And if you update things, you can also log to your updated things. There's a lock to the checksum, basically.
Hi, thanks for the talk. So, did I got you right that you said that the Nix the package manager doesn't ship systemd services?
No, Nix as a package
for Nix daemon.
It's shipped for systemd
Okay.
and one other
Okay,
init
gotcha.
system.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why my PR exists for different init systems.
Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah. So then there was missing that. Okay, so the other question would be okay, so I have like some software. I would like to add it to Nix packages, and I kind of need to. So the Nix is the language is well basically untyped, is it? Like there are types, but they are dynamically typed. Well,
I always forget about it. Sorry, that's technical data about language. I don't always remember that. I just write Nix expressions. I don't really care.
yeah, right. So I mean,
Template, basically.
how do you know what to write in like in this particular place? What can you write? Can it be like I don't know, like map or hash or whatever, or can it not be the map, or should it be only the Boolean value, or you know what I mean?
Well, actually, if you want to write Nix expressions and what you can do with them, just open the docs. Basically, there's a list of functions. I mean, I don't know to be rude or anything, but actually those are all literally in docs, or just as I mentioned to the one guy.
So there are like no. What if I don't know, like write a map where instead of a Boolean value, what will happen? Like when evaluating the expression.
If there's a syntax error or a problem with what you use.
The type's expected type doesn't match the actual one.
Then if you want to evaluate, it will tell you that there's an error. So like if you want to use, yeah, basically that.
Would it tell me that what it expects?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
In most cases, yes. It will also say you that if an option is deprecated, it will also say that. It will also say that if something is not supported anymore. That's quite a lot of things. Basically, if you take a look, deeper dive into Nix packages, when we remove something from Nix packages, there's a message created why it was removed. Or so yeah, it's deprecated. It's removed due to insecurity. There's or even certain exact CVE number.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
I actually remember that. Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's about it.
Okay, any more questions in the room?
I've got a question about nix-shells and Python. So basically, if I remember correctly, Nix doesn't support virtual env well, and you can simulate if with nix-shells as you told before. But with virtual envs, you can mix and match specific versions of your packages. And with nix-shells, as far as I know, you don't. You have the newest one, or you can pick a version of like global Nix packages, but you cannot have one package in specific version and second one in another, which is in Nix packages, for example, from 1 year ago or something like that.
Okay, FTOS was only with Python 2.7, Python 3 point something, and then it worked. But like,
okay,
I guess you mean Python 3.9 and Python 3.10 side by side, for example.
And the versions of specific packages, not Python version.
Okay, I have to check that, but I guess in Flakes you can also, for example, derivations, I guess you can probably also use logs and everything.
But you would have to use specific log for every package that you want to pick the specific version of, yeah?
For example.
Okay.
So you specify like you want to use this one and this one and this one. Maybe that would work. I have to check that if it works this way. But for example, in NixOS, you can log two different things.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any more questions? Well, I think this is it. So let's give another warm round of applause to Konrad.